The first thing my brother said at my wedding was, honestly, I didn't think Jonah would ever make it this far. And people laughed. Not everybody. But enough. Enough for me to feel that familiar pressure in my chest while I sat there beside my wife pretending it didn't bother me. The ballroom at the Ashford Hotel looked beautiful that night. Warm gold lights. White flowers everywhere. Soft jazz playing near the dance floor. Naomi spent months planning everything, and for most of the evening it had actually been perfect. Then Declan grabbed a microphone. That was the problem. My older brother had this way of turning every room into his stage. Didn't matter if it was a birthday dinner, funeral, barbecue, or apparently my wedding reception. If people were listening, Declan needed to be the center of it. He smiled around the ballroom holding a champagne glass like he was hosting a late-night show. I mean seriously, he continued, laughing lightly, if you knew Jonah growing up, this is kinda shocking. More laughter. My mother covered her mouth trying to hide a smile. My father just leaned back in his chair looking entertained. Naomi slowly set her fork down beside her plate. I noticed that immediately. That's the thing about quiet people. We notice everything because we spend most of our lives observing instead of performing. Declan kept going. Jonah was always sensitive, he said. We honestly thought he might just disappear into a cabin somewhere and argue with people online forever. A few louder laughs. I took a sip of water slowly because reacting too fast around my family never helped. If you got upset, they called you dramatic. If you stayed quiet, they acted like the joke was harmless. So over time, I learned patience. Or maybe survival. Probably both. Growing up, Declan was the golden child. Loud. Charming. Confident in a way people automatically trusted. My parents loved that about him. My dad used to say, Declan's got presence. What he meant was dominance. Meanwhile, I was quieter. More analytical. Better at listening than talking. I worked as a compliance analyst for a healthcare nonprofit in Boston. Stable job. Good salary. Predictable life. But in my family, stability wasn't impressive. It wasn't flashy enough. At holidays, relatives asked Declan about investments and business deals while I got asked to help carry chairs from the garage. That was my role. Useful. Forgettable. Safe to joke about. And honestly, after enough years, you start accepting the role people hand you. The worst part is, I didn't even hate my brother. I understood him. Declan grew up being rewarded for confidence and attention. Of course he leaned into it. My parents practically built his personality for him. Still didn't make it hurt less. Especially because the jokes never really stopped. When I was 16, Declan read one of my journal entries out loud during Thanksgiving because he thought it sounded too emotional. Everybody laughed while I sat there staring at my plate wishing I could disappear. Years later, my mother still brought that story up like it was family comedy history. Naomi noticed the dynamic almost immediately when we started dating. We met at a bookstore cafe in Cambridge during a thunderstorm. She was sitting alone reviewing legal documents while drinking coffee that smelled strong enough to wake the dead. I made some sarcastic comment about the weather and somehow that turned into a 4-hour conversation. A month later she met my family for dinner. Afterward, while we walked back to my apartment, she asked quietly, "Why do they talk to you like that?" I shrugged. "That's just how they are." "No," she said. "That's how they treat you." Big difference. I thought about that sentence for weeks afterward. Back at the wedding, Declan was still talking. "And Naomi," he said, pointing toward my wife, "you deserve an award for patience." Seriously. Scattered laughter again. Naomi smiled politely, but I could tell she was uncomfortable now. Then Declan added, "You basically adopted an overthinking rescue dog." That one hit differently. You could feel the room shift a little. Because now he wasn't just embarrassing me anymore. He was disrespecting her too. And that's when I stopped feeling embarrassed. I just got tired. Tired in this weirdly calm way. See, there was something Declan didn't know. About a year before the wedding, my nonprofit hired outside investigators before finalizing a major hospital merger. Part of my job involved reviewing financial disclosures connected to several investment firms. One of those firms happened to belong to Declan. At first I assumed it was coincidence. Then I noticed irregularities. Inflated reporting numbers. Misclassified transfers. Carefully worded disclosures that looked fine unless you spent years analyzing financial compliance for a living. Which I had. Nothing criminal. Nothing dramatic. But enough to trigger investigations once regulators started digging deeper. And the craziest part? Declan definitely knew better. That guy built his entire identity around being the smartest person in the room. I never told my family. Couldn't legally. So instead, I stayed quiet and watched. Months passed. Auditors got involved. Attorneys too. One of those attorneys happened to be sitting across the ballroom during my wedding reception that night. Elliot Granger. Senior counsel for the State Oversight Division. Declan hadn't noticed him yet. That was his problem. People who spend their whole lives performing eventually stop paying attention to the audience. Declan raised his glass again. To Jonah, he announced loudly, proof that even the backup sibling can eventually pull off a miracle. A few people laughed automatically. Then silence followed. Heavy silence. Because even the guests could tell the joke had stopped being funny. I stood up slowly. No yelling. No dramatic scene. Honestly, calm makes people more nervous. Declan smirked when I took the microphone because he thought he already knew how this would go. Either I'd laugh it off or finally lose my temper. Instead I looked around the ballroom for a second before speaking. You know, I said calmly, Declan's always loved attention. A couple nervous chuckles. I continued. When we were kids, I used to think confidence meant being the loudest person in the room. Declan's smile tightened slightly. But honestly, I said, real confidence probably looks more like not needing to humiliate people to feel important. The room went completely quiet. You could actually hear silverware clink somewhere near the bar. Then I glanced toward Elliot Granger across the ballroom. Small glance. That's all. But Declan followed it instinctively. And the second he recognized him, the color drained from his face immediately. There it was. The first moment in my entire life where my brother realized I wasn't powerless. I handed the microphone back carefully. No hard feelings, I said quietly. I just think everybody's tired of the same joke. Nobody moved for a second. Then Naomi's father started clapping slowly from his table. Others joined after that. Not loud cheering. Something better. Respect. Declan sat down without another word. And for the first time ever, nobody rushed to rescue him from embarrassment. The investigation became public a few weeks later. Financial penalties. Regulatory reviews. Several major clients quietly backing away from Declan's firm. Nothing criminal. Just enough truth to collapse the image he spent years building. Funny how quickly arrogance falls apart once consequences enter the room. My parents called constantly after the news broke. Mostly my mother crying about family loyalty. That phrase always interested me because somehow it only mattered when Declan was hurting. I met her once at a small cafe downtown. Rain tapped softly against the windows while she stirred untouched tea. "You embarrassed your brother," she said quietly. I almost laughed. 30 years of jokes at my expense and suddenly embarrassment mattered. No, I told her calmly. He embarrassed himself. I just stopped protecting him from it. She looked down after that because deep down, she knew it was true. A month later, Naomi and I moved into a smaller apartment near the harbor. Peaceful place. Quiet mornings. No performances. One night while unpacking books, Naomi looked at me and smiled. "You know what changed?" she asked. "What?" "You stopped needing their approval to feel valuable." I sat with that for a while. Because honestly, she was right. My whole life I kept waiting for my family to suddenly respect me. But some people get too comfortable with the version of you that stays small for them. And eventually you realize something important. You can't control how people see you. But you can stop giving them front row seats to your life.